Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining my fellow TA to Every colleagues, mentors, and all of you who have joined from different organizations. Welcome all to this exciting fireside chat that we have. Just to introduce the topic to all of you, it is about driving a robust security agenda for 2022. As you all know, the security, risk, and business continuity, all of these aspects had to rapidly evolve and rise up to the COVID challenge a couple of years ago. And pandemic, which is now endemic, it has changed every walk of life, and it has definitely changed for security, risk, and business continuity. So they are also evolving. The nature of work has changed. Workplaces have changed. So it raises a big question. So what is security? And how has the risk elevated? And in spite of all of this, how do we keep our businesses going? Does security just mean a firewall on an application, or it means an imposing guard in a uniform? We don't know, or it's a combination of everything. So this is what we are here to talk in this fireside chat. So let me please allow me to introduce Rachelle Loyear. Rachel, welcome to our fireside chat. So good morning, Rachel.
Good morning. Thank
Good
you.
morning.
I'm
Yeah.
really excited to have the opportunity to talk about security and risk and how we mesh it all into technology in the future today.
Yes. And to all our listeners, Rachel, please allow me to introduce you to them. Rachel is VP of Sales, and she's the head of Allied Universal Institute's Academy of Integrated Security. She has authored various books on enterprise security and risk management. Some of them include Concepts and Applications, Manager's Guide to Security and Risk Management, and of course, the business continuity as well. She is a member of American Society for Industrial Security. She's in the board of directors for North America. She's a certified information security manager. She's master of business continuity professional, and she serves also on the cybersecurity advisory board for SIA. And very inspiring profile, Rachel. And thank you so much for taking time with us this morning to be on this exciting topic and this conversation. So welcome all. So Rachel, one thing that comes to my mind the moment I think about security, business continuity, risk is, how are all the organizations in any industry or in any walk of life, they're all trying to understand and evaluate their security and risks. I was wondering, what are the post-pandemic shifts? What has changed when it comes to security and risk and continuity?
So,
in your opinion?
I think some of the trends that we are seeing in risk, and risk being very dynamic, every day we turn on the news and there's some new incident happening. But since we have started to come out of the pandemic, we do see a few questions for business risk specifically. People are making this choice about whether work from home is a permanent solution for many of their employees, whether they want to bring them back on site. They're not quite ready to get rid of buildings, but they don't know what to do about them yet. And they're not quite ready to say it's all from home, but people like working from home. So we may end up with a hybrid situation. These trends are quite significant, whichever way it goes. And I don't think anybody can truly say which way it's going. Those trends are very significant in the kinds of security that we have to think about, how risk is evolving. And then another way that even business that can't be worked from home, manufacturing, things that must rely on people and places, we've got a complete shift in how people are thinking about supply chain, thinking about how much just-in-time buffer they need. And that goes along with additional security risks, because in times of supply chain uncertainty, we have some scarcity, which gives us fraud and theft and other types of risk that need to be considered. So to me, I think those are the two major pandemic-driven risk situations that we're looking out for. And there's a whole host of other geopolitical, migration, water rights, things that can impact business and continuity.
Right.
But pandemic specifically, I think those are the two big ones that we're looking at.
Right. Right. And I can relate to what you're saying, especially being in Bangalore, which is considered, the Silicon Valley of India. And it was also, incidentally, the epicenter in the second wave and also in the first wave. We saw a lot of casualties. And when I look around, this is exactly what you said is what I'm seeing. People are trying to figure out, can this be completely work from home? And in certain other aspects where it can't be, they don't know what is the percentage of employees to let in and still keep the business going. So I relate to what you're saying, absolutely. And so this brings me to my next question. So on the continuity side, on the business continuity side, a pandemic has changed things, as you said. So how can we stay business as usual going forward? Now it's not a pandemic anymore. When you see the European countries and the West, it's already considered an endemic. So it's something that we'll have to all live with.
Yeah, I think that some people are a little bit more happy to call it an endemic now than others. Similar to your situation, because I happen to live in New York City and it was a heavily impacted city. I think we have a slightly different perspective on it. But regardless of where you are on the continuum, you have to take some kind of plan into place. And this is where we have seen an enormous growth in people thinking about not just business continuity planning, which is a very tactical, how do I come back from a disaster, but true resilience planning, where if we want to stay business as usual, we have to understand everything about the business. And we have to make every piece of the business, our security, our networks, our operations, everything that functions, if we truly understand it from a resilient standpoint, then that allows us to keep going, because we know which pieces have to keep going, which can be dropped at a moment's notice, what has to be back in 6 months, what has to be back in a year. And that's one of the places where, if we tie this technology question into it, are we building organizational capacity to track all of that? That's a very difficult question for customers right now. There's processes out there that help you plan activities, but this holistic view and being able to see the big picture and have it in a map, I think that's a place that can really be helped going forward. To keep us business as usual, we've got to have a map of what business is. And I think that's a gap right now in the in industry.
Right. So how do we get to this map? Like, is there a matrix, or because we have to map this, and like you said, we have to make every aspect of our business nimble and to kind of be able to tweak it and turn it. And so is there a matrix, or is there a best practice in place that we can?
Well, the nice thing is, at least there's a best practice in place, because risk management generally has you understand your assets and critical functions, understand the impact of those assets, and then you decide, you see what risks could harm them, stop them, and then you decide what to do about it. So that's the standard risk cycle of what do you have to protect, what do you have to protect it from, how do you protect it? But I think where we're lacking a matrix and a really solid way to manage these things is in a technology that allows us to touch and feel and interact with it. Some of the digitization efforts are going towards things like digital twinning, and you can see how these things work. That's a little early, but could you imagine being able to build a digital twin of your entire organization? If you're an executive and you have, I'm going to put on my Oculus and I'm going to have a digital twin of my organization, so I can see that if if this call center out in Idaho goes down, how does that impact my financial center in London?
Right.
That to me is a real future case for business resilience, organizational resilience. And okay, you can probably make the same map in a spreadsheet, but it's not as cool as thinking about it in a three-dimensional chess game.
I agree. I agree. It's a complex network of applications, and the sheer gamut of it makes it all the more challenging. And yeah. So, what about cyber attacks? Like, how are what are our learnings from the cyber attacks, and how are we proactively addressing such risks? Is it something that we have to proactively address, or and for those who have been attacked, how are they reacting to it?
So that's two. The first question is interesting because in the security industry association, I am on the cybersecurity advisory board for that, and industry is looking very, very closely at this.
Yeah.
Because the last thing that you want as a third-party provider is to be the gap through which the cyber attack came. And when our organizations get more complex, and as everything is moving on the network and everything is cyber,
Right.
if you have multiple systems that don't mesh completely,
Mhm.
there can be gaps and there can be problems. So
Right.
what we're starting to see in industry is a voluntary drive
Right.
towards standardization,
Right.
so that things can be plug and play. You do not end up with gaps and holes.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say that everything is perfect, but if you have at least alignment to begin with, then your job as a security person is narrowed and you have fewer things to look at. So I
Right.
think that voluntary charge that I see, at least in the security industry, and I am sure that other manufacturing spaces are doing the same,
Right.
is to make it so our systems are at least not creating vulnerabilities in each other. And that's the first step. People think that government regulation might be the answer,
Right.
and it's happening.
Right.
But is it the answer? I don't. I think if people are forced to do a thing, they do it.
Right.
But if people do a thing voluntarily, they may do it better
Right.
because they see the reason for doing it. So
Right.
I think I'm heartened by what I see these industry manufacturing agencies doing.
Right. I agree with you. Like, in the retail industry where I'm coming from, we have had these kinds of instances where the attacks have not been with the first tier of the applications that the corporation or the organization is directly responsible for, but it is the extended network and families. For instance, it could be suppliers and manufacturers where they have understood these routes and they've gone and attacked those, but still it is still your responsibility because it is your bottom line. It is still under the purview of your transaction boundary because somebody came to you and ordered something which is getting delivered by a supplier or a manufacturer. So the business, the origin of the business is still through you. So I completely relate to your message here, which I think is to be voluntary and to make sure that your applications are well secured and communicating well. And so, yeah, I agree with you.
Well, the other thing that voluntary helps with
Right.
is that it can supersede
Right.
a need for regulation.
Right.
So if you do something that is stronger than any eventual regulation, it also makes it easier then to say, yes, I meet
Yes.
that requirement
Right.
later. So.
Right. So to your point on regulation, I'm just wondering, are there any changes happening to the compliance certification standards post-pandemic for enterprises to comply with, especially for this particular topic around security and risk?
So interestingly, because of the pandemic, many security organizations have had health and safety responsibilities added to them.
Okay.
So now you have, if I'm a chief security officer,
Right.
I am responsible for the physical security of my assets. I must have my assets under control. I'm responsible for the cyber security of all of my assets, because
Right.
there's almost nothing in my life except perhaps this pencil that isn't connected to the internet.
Correct.
And then I also have this safety piece.
Right.
The safety piece, I think, may be the most problematic for people driven by the pandemic. And it's the thing that you mentioned earlier. If I am in the United States and
Right.
my business, maybe I'm the person who sits in the United States, but I have a global enterprise. Now I
Yes.
have to understand what the CDC is saying. I have to understand what Britain's national health is saying. If I have an office in Denmark, I have to understand what they're saying.
Right.
I can choose to follow perhaps WHO guidelines
Right.
instead, but now I have to follow all of those. And unfortunately, because science evolves, they are all changing every day. And
Right.
so this is a really difficult spot to manage in post-pandemic, because there's a patchwork of them.
Mhm.
And if I'm a small business, it's a little easier. I have to understand my
Correct.
patch.
Right.
But if I am even a national business in a large country, I have
Right.
to understand city and local and regulatory and all of these things. So there's a lot going on there, and it's a big job. I think that somewhere out there, somebody is going to invent something to keep track of all of this, and it's going to make it a little bit easier for folks, but not quite. I haven't seen one, so we'll have to see.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you. Recently had a chance to work in the Middle East, and they were delivering to Germany, and Germany has its own laws in terms of how it can be, how you can return an item. Do you have, when they are returning an item, who pays the shipping charges? So these are all the laws and compliance issues, and GDPR is applied in European countries, whereas it's not in the Middle East. So there will, and e-commerce laws itself is evolving in the Middle East. So it's a moving window of changes there, and it's very hard to. And yeah, somebody has to invent something where we will always be fed with the latest, greatest
Yeah.
rules and regulations out there. So I relate to you.
Although right now it does give a lot of lawyers a lot of jobs. So, if I'm a lawyer, I love that I have all this complexity.
I agree. I agree. And now, slightly, focusing on the risk aspect, we talked about working from home, and so that is again, personal and corporate. It's a warp and weft of personal and corporate, and we've all had those instances where a kid comes running in the middle of a key meeting with the board of directors, and so. Has that increased the risk of it all in terms of data and leakage, and somebody IT savvy, or somebody coming as a guest to our houses, looking through? So what are your thoughts on the mode of work changing, adding more risk to it all?
So that for sure. I like to say that now every single employee has to be the chief security officer of their own living room.
Yes.
Um, it's critical that if companies are allowing people to work from home, that they arm them with the tools to
Yeah.
secure their local space.
Yes.
And it can be pretty easy. It can be as easy as a flyer that each employee gets that says, hey, if you have Wi-Fi, make sure your Wi-Fi is set to this kind of security. If
Yes.
you're on the network, make sure you have two-factor authentication for all of
Mhm.
your apps that you use.
Yes.
If you allow your employees to use their personal devices,
Mhm.
for example, I am currently having a conversation with you using my personal device, but on it, there is a security segment that
Mhm.
is work dedicated, is controlled by my organization.
Mhm.
I have cloud access. I don't have any organization material on my personal device.
Mhm.
These are pretty easy things to think about,
Right.
but they are absolutely things that must be thought about. And it's really
Yeah.
all about that employee education and making sure people do the right thing.
Yeah.
And then that closes a lot of that gap. But you
Yeah.
just have to think about it.
Right. Right. Yes, I loved what you just said. We have to be our own chief security officer, and yeah, anything could happen when you're working from home. It could be as simple as we are cleaning the home and water spills on your laptop, or yeah, from that to somebody just plugging in a USB, and it could be anything. So I loved what you just said, that we have to be chief security officers of our own, right? Um, whilst we are talking about security, risk, and continuity in all of this, what I wanted to ask you was, is it only technology, or is it also a human element? What role each of these will play in this arena?
So my role in the world is basically to determine that mix. As an integrated security person, I am a big fan of technology.
Right.
There's stuff that technology is absolutely amazing at, because security effects, what you want to be able to do is detect. You have to be able to see what is happening,
Right.
and you have to be able to respond.
Right.
Technology is amazing at detecting things. A camera will never get bored of staring at a screen. A door lock never gets tired and falls asleep.
Right.
You don't have attention issues or anything like that. However, when it comes to response,
Right.
technology, no matter how many companies say how great their AI is, it doesn't quite get the decision making done yet.
Right.
I have faith that, like, I think technology is going to eventually be able to assist humans, but as humans, if something happens, let's just give it a simple slip and fall. A
Right.
camera can detect that somebody has fallen down in your lobby, but a camera can't go ask them how they are. A camera
Correct.
can't help them get back up. A
Right.
robot can't even really effectively help them get back up. So it's this mix of using technology to help people be better
Right.
and using people to help technology be more human.
Right.
And I think that's where the sweet spot is for security, because there are things that technology is better, cheaper, faster,
Right.
and humans are still necessary.
Right.
And I don't think we get rid of the human aspect of this for a very, very long time.
Right.
So that's
No, I agree with you,
yeah.
and I loved what you're saying, because I think the message is that technology and human, as long as we have them play to each other's strengths, that when something is noticed or when somebody is alerted, they are acting as humans, but the alerting comes from the technology, and the empathy comes from the human. So I totally relate. So, in your role currently with Allied Universal, where you're providing a lot of these services and driving transformations, how are you engaging in risk assessments, mitigation? This is to our earlier point of being proactive versus reactive. So, how are we assessing risks, and how are you mitigating those?
So interestingly, I mean, the reason I'm on this call, and I know you guys, is because we wanted to automate that process.
Yes.
So we've been working with your company
Yeah.
for a year or so, maybe a little longer, to build a system.
Right.
And this goes back to the technology plus human. We wanted to build a system that could answer these questions, that could look at assets and identify the risks to them and figure out what the best scenario is to mitigate all of those risks.
Right.
And it's quite a complicated dance, but when
Right.
you break it down into pieces and you get the expert knowledge
Right.
into the system,
Right.
now what we're doing is we can have people who have good knowledge but are not experts
Right.
using a set of tools to augment them.
Right.
So the expertise is baked in, and
Right.
now I have an army of people in this organization who can go out and have great conversations driven by this underlying technology that helps them ask and answer questions.
Right.
And to me, I think that is the perfect
Right.
case of proactive, and how tech and people can really help each other is this this point and the system that we've built together of finding the way to make it simple for the person, and yet all the complexity is still there in the background, but it's served up in a simple way that anybody can access and have. So that's what we're doing. And we're finding it a very helpful tool for our frontline personnel who have to have these conversations. So
Nice. And I think those levers that we build is what is going to, I think, make everybody security aware, risk aware, and that is what is going to, I think, change this conversation. From being just security aware to being at the forefront. Rachel, I will just pause here for a minute, and I just want to prompt all of our audiences here listening in, as we are coming to the top of the hour for this conversation. Please if you have any questions, please put it in the chat box, and we will try and address as many as possible. So coming back, Rachel, so now I want to ask you, what differentiates a leader from the rest, when we are managing risks and security, and, what skills and knowledge and technologies do these leaders have that others don't and must eventually?
And this is a question that we've been wrestling with in security, because to me, risk management is a business decision. CEOs and CFOs, they manage risk every day. And the security industry is now embracing this risk-based approach of saying, look, you don't have to protect every single asset, but you do have to understand. And to me, that key word that I come back to over and over again is understand. Understand what's critical, understand what's worth protecting, understand what your return on investment is to protect these things, and understand what risk you can accept, and be okay with sometimes accepting risk in the name of getting business done. So I think, to me, the difference of a leader in this area is truly understanding what's critical, and that business involves risk of many, many kinds. Some risks you absolutely do not accept. But some risks might be acceptable to an organization. They might be willing to put some money on the line. So I think that's what differentiates the leader, is that business mindset and the ability to truly understand what's critical and what can be let go.
Right. No, this is a wonderful. I think this culminates our conversation. I think the first step, as you just mentioned, is to acknowledge, and just go back to your drawing boards and say, okay, these are the things that I'm facing today. This I'm accepting. This I'm solving. This I will solve. And to acknowledge is the first step. And that's what sets leaders from the actioning leaders from, the slightly relaxing the rest of them. So that's a wonderful culmination to I think our conversation here. And Rachel, I have questions coming in. I think it's just flowing in, so which I think is credit to our audience, and they're paying attention and listening in. So one of the questions that came up that I would like to chime with you is, they want to know what are the top security challenges that have surfaced due to pandemic and work from home wave. Are there any top 3 challenges that have come up in your experience?
So I'll pick the top 2 for the big one is that question that you mentioned earlier in Bangalore, is traffic control, deciding who can come back, who can't come back, and controlling that, because some people want to come back and they're not allowed to yet. Some people are supposed to come back and they haven't. So that's a big one. And it's one that actually a little policy and a little technology together can help you with. The second big one is one that we did talk about quite a bit, which is work from home network security. If you are not properly securing the entirety of your network, if you don't have VPNs, if you don't give your employees the tools to secure, that gap is huge, and all kinds of things can come in through that Starbucks Wi-Fi if they're down the street using it.
Yes.
So I think those, to me, post-pandemic, are the big two: is control and who's in and who's out.
Right. Nice. And another person wants to know, how should organization prepare to deal with the security vulnerabilities and breaches? Because the response times have to be very rapid, right? In a post-pandemic world, because otherwise everything comes to a screeching halt. So they want to know, how can I manage my vulnerabilities and prepare for such things?
So I will say that is a place where technology is really great. That's that place where a monitoring technology never gets bored. A monitoring technology can alert you to an anomaly, whatever you tune, and you can tune the anomaly to say, I want to get everything, or you can say, I want it to get nothing. But network monitoring, like detection and sensors, are very, very good now. And to me, vulnerability monitoring is where technology absolutely excels, because it watches it all the time, and it can alert to a human who can review and escalate that. So that's perfect there.
Right. And I have this hands-on experience looking at organizations trying to struggle with the alerting mechanisms, because there's so many applications, so many processes, and so many digital slash human elements that are warp and weft. So who should be alerted? So I acknowledge what you're saying. I think they should pay more attention and invest more time and effort in looking at their alert mechanisms, be it just an application that is running or somebody walking into the office.
For sure.
Totally. Yeah, and Rosie, I thank you for your question. She wants to know, movement to work from home from a secure office spaces. Does it simplify or complicate the security vulnerability in the workforce for organizations? She just wants.
It very much complicates it, because now you have everybody in a lot of different places. So for people in my line of work who assess these things, we now have a lot more to do.
Right. I agree with you. And the last, I think, the question for this fireside chat is, Sharon, thank you for this question. He wants to know, how is Allied Universal leveraging connected things to secure assets of its customers, for example, men, material, machinery? Because I think, from 10 years ago to now, the connected things have evolved and matured in their own way, and which can feed to making things more secure, handle more risks. So
we actually at Allied Universal have been developing software platforms that do connect all of this. So we have a system called Helios, and it sits in the hand of a person, an officer on the site, but it connects seamlessly to procedure, to sensors, to systems, so that technology can communicate to the officer what's happening. It communicates to the officer what to do about it. Are you a trained person? Yes, you are. Is it always good if you're a trained person to have a little reminder in your hand? Yes, it is. So, and then this piece of technology can flow everything back up the chain. So it's documenting, it's tied together. That's the beginning of the connected journey. We are at the beginning of it. The whole world is at the beginning of this connected journey. But I'm excited from our point of view that we are doing it. We are leveraging machine learning already, which, in my opinion, I'm very happy about, because I think that puts us ahead of the game in being able to use this data to benchmark and set best practice going on. So thanks for that question.
Yes, and thank you, Rachel. And if I may just supplement, I think even the evolving technologies like low-code, no-code platforms, which are excellent in workflow management, because what you just said is, one is about machine learning, understanding what is happening on the ground. The other thing is the managing the entire workflow behind that, because you inform this person, he reacts in a certain way, then you go and get some other information from another application, and then you have to cohesively make it make sense, if as it were. So I think that's an excellent question. So I think we are 300 seconds over. And I think that's a good milestone. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, all the audience. Rachel, particularly you, we appreciate you taking your time this morning. And I am not sure if I gave you, if I gave you enough time to get your cup of coffee this morning. So
I did.
I apologize ahead of time. And yeah, thank you. We look forward to more conversations like this. And to all our audience, we'll keep this rolling, this momentum rolling to talk more about, security and risk and business continuity as we are living and breathing it at this point. So thank you all. Thank you, One. Thank you all, ladies, gentlemen, all of you. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel.